What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to continue our coverage over the Norman Osborn Thunderbolts era, where we actually do pick up with the later half of this run. And what I mean is that, basically at this point, you have Norman Osborn get rid of the old team that was given to him, and now he is going to bring in a new team. Now, with this new team, is basically being brought in because Norman Osborn has been moved into a position where he's now in charge of protecting America. And so he got rid of S.H.I.E.L.D., replaced S.H.I.E.L.D. with his own organization called Hammer, and he formed his own Avengers group known as the Dark Avengers. Now, most of the characters you saw on the Thunderbolts in the earlier parts of Norman Osborn's time with the Thunderbolts have left that team and were moved to the Avengers team. And so that is why he's bringing in a new set of characters to make the new Thunderbolts. And of course, meaning that these characters can be more ruthless like Norman Osborn wants his guys to be. Because the last team, you had some characters who weren't really that ruthless. But now, Norman Osborn has the ability to bring in characters who can be ruthless and crazy and wild. And you see what I mean as we go through this book, but Norman Osborn still has to go through one more certain task. Now, the last thing Norman Osborn has to do is to basically kind of have the president on his side. Because right now, the president is kind of believing that maybe Norman Osborn should not be in position of Homeland Security. That right now, Norman Osborn should probably be in jail. Now, there is a good reason why the president thinks that, but you'll see why here in a moment. But you do have Norman Osborn waiting for the president because right now the president has asked Norman Osborn and Victoria Hand to fly with him as they fly over to Moscow. And as soon as the president arrives, you have the president say, like, listen, I understand you got rid of S.H.I.E.L.D. I understand you have a new organization called Hammer. I know your goal is to take no prisoners. But here's my thing right now for you, though. I feel like you were given way too much power way too quickly because I'm hearing a lot of bad things about you right now. And of course, they're coming from one particular person. So if you're able to convince me that everything this person is saying is false, then you can move on with your job. But if you can't, I can have you removed from that power seat you're sitting in at the moment. Now, the one person who's basically having the president having second doubts about Norman Osborn is Doc Samson. And this is huge because you have to remember, Doc Samson was the one who was kind of like a therapist for one of the last team members of Norman Osborn's old Thunderbolts team, Pennis. And of course, Pennis did have a lot of problems, but when Doc Samson came by to see Pennis, well, that was the moment a lot of bad things happened at the Thunderbolts base, including Norman Osborn slipping up and turning back into the Green Goblin, something that he told the world that he had under control. But of course, with a tad bit of pressure, he lost that control and turned into the Green Goblin. And so it's now Doc Samson saying, I don't feel like Norman Osborn should be in charge of Homeland Security. Now, this is where we basically jump back 6 weeks ago, where, of course, this begins the process of us learning who is going to be on the new Thunderbolts team. And the reason why I say that is because we actually do pick up with some lady spy breaking into one of the Hammer facilities. And remember, Hammer is what Norman Osborn made as a way to replace S.H.I.E.L.D., to get rid of S.H.I.E.L.D. and have his own organization. Now, with that being said, this lady is able to break into the place, but of course she's caught by some guards, but of course she's able to actually take care of those guards. Now, after she does all of that, that is the moment she is confronted by Norman Osborn, where you have Norman Osborn tell us who is this super spy. And basically it is Yelena Belova, the second Black Widow. Now, I want to say she first appeared back in New Avengers written by Brian Michael Bendis, the new Avengers series that came right after Avengers Disassembled. But basically, she is the second Black Widow. Now, of course, this is Norman Osborn saying, I want you to join my new Thunderbolts team, but I also want you to be the field leader of my new team. And so now we see one of the members of this new team. But getting back into the present day, we actually do pick up with Norman Osborn having a conversation with the president and Doc Samson. Now remember, Doc Samson is the one who's right now telling the president that basically he believes that Norman Osborn is a bad person, that Norman Osborn is too crazy to have in that position for Homeland Security. Now the reason why Doc Samson is saying this, because when Doc Samson came by for a therapy session, of course, he saw a lot of things happen in Thunderbolts Mountain, the base of the Thunderbolts. But one of the things that did happen was Norman Osborn basically going crazy. He went crazy, turned into the Green Goblin. He killed a lot of agents, and he almost killed swordsmen as well. And so, of course, it is Doc Samson saying, you have somebody who is literally insane. He is literally insane and shouldn't be locked up. He should be nowhere near this position at all, or any kind of position. Now, Norman Osborn tries to kind of play it off by saying that Doc Samson is lying because Doc Samson actually brought a weapon into the facility. Now, the reason why you have Norman Osborn bringing this weapon up is because a terrorist attack did happen at the same time Norman Osborn turned into the Green Goblin. Because that terrorist attack, it made Norman Osborn freak out. It made him turn into the Green Goblin. But what Norman is saying right now is that the knife that Doc Samson brought in could technically be a connection between Doc Samson and those terrorists as well. Now you have Doc say, no, the reason why I brought that knife in was part of my therapy session, and that is it. But while you have the three men talking to one another, well, that is the moment you have Norman Osborn hit a button on his sleeve. Sleeve. Now, of course, this begins the master plan Norman Osborn has as a way to convince the president that he is the best person to have in that position of Homeland Security, because that is the moment the jets that are flying near the president's jet, well, they get taken out of the sky just like that. Bam, bam. And the question is, though, what is taking them out? Now, remember, at this point, right now, all we know is that the Black Widow 2 is the only member of this new team. We have not met the rest of the team just yet, but we are about to. Because in the cockpit, you do have the two pilots freaking out, but that is the moment we come to find out one of the pilots is actually Black Widow 2. And of course, she does take out the actual pilot who was flying the plane. But inside her shirt, and of course in one particular area of her shirt, you have the third Ant-Man appear. And this third Ant-Man is actually Eric McGrady. Now, Eric McGrady is a very interesting Ant-Man character, because at first he is a bad guy, but later on he does become a good guy, quotation marks. But right now we come to find out that he is part of this new Thunderbolts team. Now, the next character is actually Ghost. Now, Ghost is a cool character because nobody truly knows his name. We do know pieces of his origin story, but basically, when it comes to Ghost, his suit he wears gives him the ability to be intangible, meaning that he's able to phase through walls or phase through things. And so he's kind of like Shadowcat, but of course a bad guy who needs a suit to be like Shadowcat. Also, he can somewhat fly as well. But either way, we see Ghost breaking into the plane of the president, taking out a few guards to get a certain kind of disc. Now, this leads into the next part of Norman Osborn's plan, because you have Ant-Man actually stick something in Doc Samson's neck. Now, remember, when it comes to Ant-Man, all of them, they can basically take their body and shrink down to size. And so you have Ant-Man 3, or Eric O'Grady, come on Doc Samson's neck and shoot something in his neck to, of course, make Doc Samson go a tad bit crazy. And so that is the moment you have Doc Samson go really crazy. Now, not to the extreme just yet, but to the point where Doc Samson's attitude completely changed, where he's more aggressive with Norman Osborn. But while the three men are talking right now, and you have Doc Samson saying something is happening right now outside the plane, but also inside the plane as well. Well, of course, that is the moment their room gets blown up. Like, the wall to their room gets blown open, and that is the moment you have the Green Goblin appear. Now, the problem is, though, Norman Osborn is sitting next to Doc Samson. And so the question is now, how can there be a Green Goblin right there if Norman Osborn is over there? That's the big question. But when we get into the next chapter, we actually do pick up with the Green Goblin attacking the plane that belongs to the president. It's a full-on attack at the moment. And with that happening, you also have Doc Samson beginning to go crazy as well. And so you have two different things happening all over the place. And the big question is, though, still, how can the Green Goblin be there while you still have Norman Osborn over there? That's the big question right now. But either way, you have Norman Osborn kind of tell us that he planned all of this, which of course we already knew by this point. But we knew Norman Osborn planned all of this because he knew that Doc Samson was going to try something very soon. Now, with that being said, you have Norman Osborn basically use some kind of device to knock out the president. But the president saw enough to witness that there is someone else as the Green Goblin, and also Doc Samson going crazy. Now, with all that being said, you then have Ghost appear. And remember, Ghost's tech suit gives him the ability to become intangible. And so you have Ghost just grab Doc Samson and drop him. Just drop him out of the plane, and there goes Doc Samson. But the president has saw enough evidence to prove that basically Doc Samson is too crazy and wild. And Norman Osborn cannot be the Green Goblin if someone else is right now the Green Goblin. Now, this actually leads into the funny part of the book, where you have Norman Osborn fighting against the Green Goblin. Now, you could have taken this story into the idea of, is Norman Osborn fighting against the Green Goblin in a way for the control of his body? But of course we know that this story is not about the mind of Norman Osborn. It's about the idea of Norman Osborn trying to prove to the president that basically he is a good person by doing this whole switcheroo idea. And so while you have the Green Goblin about to kidnap the president, you have Norman Osborn jump in to fight the Green Goblin. And their fight does last for a couple pages. And honestly, you can tell this whole entire fight is staged, because it's Norman Osborn just beating down on the Green Goblin. And then he actually throws the Green Goblin off the plane. And so it's kind of like Norman saying, look at me. I took down a bad guy to protect the president, especially someone named the Green Goblin, to show that I'm, Norman Osborn, is not the Green Goblin. And you're kind of like, but we know you are the Green Goblin, dude. Like, we know you are. It's kind of obvious. But either way, though, you do have Norman Osborn being able to save the president. Now, of course, we do see the fake Green Goblin actually being able to land on a plane. Now, of course, that is the moment we kind of find out another member of the team, and that member is Paladin. Now, Paladin is a mercenary, and matter of fact, we kind of covered this character back in our Shadowland coverage, the entire Daredevil event called Shadowland. But Paladin was kind of part of that event. Not really. He had his own tie-in alongside with Misty Knight. But either way, though, Paladin is a mercenary, and of course right now he's working with the Thunderbolts right now. So he's part of this team as well. Now we do hear someone call the fake Green Goblin the headmaster or the headman, but either way, we kind of learning more about this team. Now, this is where you have Yolanda being able to land the plane, but after she does, you do have the president and Norman Osborn have a conversation with one another. Now, while they're having this conversation, it is basically the president saying, you know what, Norman Osborn, you know what? Maybe you should be in charge of Homeland Security. Maybe you are the right choice. Maybe I was wrong about you. And so Norman Osborn's plan worked. Now he has the president basically in his grasp. The president is on his side. And with the president being on Norman Osborn's side, that means Norman Osborn now has the chance to actually be able to have some support in the idea of him being the leader of Homeland Security. But of course, you did have Norman Osborn tell his Hammer agents to put out a warrant for the arrest of Doc Samson, because you have Norman saying Doc Samson tried to kill the president. And so right now, it's a way for Norman Osborn to lock up Doc Samson. And that right there is very huge. Now, of course, with the success of Norman Osborn saving the president, quotation marks again, you basically have the news playing it all over the world, where, of course, everyone is beginning to see Norman Osborn being this guy who was able to protect the president. Now, with that being said, though, you do have one ex-member of the Thunderbolts who are right now hiding out in the camp, a homeless camp, see the news. And when she does, it's her realizing what has happened to the team that she used to be part of, the team that she used to lead, the team that was all hers at one point. And that character is Songbird. Because remember, Songbird left the team, but only because when Norman Osborn got promoted, he was trying to clear house. And he took most of the team and made the Dark Avengers. But when it came to Songbird, he wanted her gone. He tried to kill her. Now she was able to escape, but she now has to lay low. But it's her now seeing that Norman Osborn is doing all the right things to keep himself in. Now, we do kind of find out that basically Norman Osborn has moved the Thunderbolts team into a new location. So no longer Thunderbolts Mountain. Now they're in the Cube. Now, the Cube used to be a way to hold certain kind of criminals who had powers. But now the Cube's been shut down. It's basically being used as a base for the Thunderbolts. Now, of course, we get reminded of all the characters who are going to be part of this new team. So Black Widow 2, Ghost, Ant-Man 3, Headman, and also Paladin. This is your new Thunderbolts team. Now, with that being said, though, that is also the moment you kind of have the book tell us what we are going to expect next. And right now, the Thunderbolts, they do have a certain target. And that target is no other than Deadpool. We're going to have a Deadpool / Thunderbolts crossover very soon. So here we go in the next video. But with that being said, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know. Your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.